poa. I hope umeshinda fiti. Pia mimi nimeshinda poa. I'd like to welcome you to another session of Just a Podcast. As usual, I'm your host with the Moses. They call me Timothy. And I'd like to give thanks for everybody out there mwenye anafuatilia the sessions. It's a really big help and a massive help. Continue like that, manze. I know I'm positive, something better will happen, and as a family always tutashare. And you being my family pia, share with other people there, let them know about this. So on this next podcast, actually it was courtesy of Tazama Media World. So they had invited this guest, and it was Eric Omondi. Yeah, I know you are wondering if he's the comedian, but this guy is a comedian too, but alikuwa Spice FM kwa ile adults in the room. So he was talking about journalism, mobile journalism, and keeping your news fresh as a journalist, and the ethics of a journalist, and preferably he was talking about books over mobile phones. So I hope you'll have a nice session. It's a bit long, but take your time and listen. I know there are some few things you'll gain. Najua generation ya sai, they don't prefer books, they prefer phones. But I hope you have a nice session, and I'll see you on the next one. Be blessed, manze. Kama uja subscribe, enda pale YouTube, it's Just a Pod. Twitter, it's at Just a Podcast 254, and on Spotify it's anchor.fm/Ivusa-Timothy. My contact info, angalia kwa hizo podcast zingine utazipata. Let's keep the fire burning.
First time in the world where we have information overload, and it's really unhealthy if you think about it. Like you wake up, you know what happened to Russia, you know what happened in Kino, and you know what we had for breakfast, and the way they are going to set the whole town in fire. It's a lot. It's a lot. I don't think it's healthy, even the way we have mobile phones, so that somebody accesses you on your phone under your pillow 24/7. I don't think that's healthy. So to that I would say, I commend the reading of books, because reading is leading. There's something about sitting with a book that is very different than maybe sitting and watching TV. It's very engaging. I mean, your brain cells are really engaged when you read. So what I would also add to what you've said is I would highly recommend unplugging from social media intentionally. Not saying, you started to say, huyo mtu amededi vibaya, sitaki kuangalia. No. Like just unplugging and saying, like I do this on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. I don't go on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I completely I don't even detach. What is it called? Uninstall them.
What?
Yeah. And I've done it for years. No, it's not extreme.
It's extreme.
How?
Why do you have to uninstall and have to install it again on a Monday when you can just be as disciplined and just don't touch it?
No, that if you have that discipline, bless your heart. But if you're like me, who a message will pop or a DM and I'll respond before I know it, I'm on Twitter, and then before I know it, I'm watching a video, it helps that you detach. Right? So if you can say, they'll pop and I won't look. If you're that strong, bless your heart. But so what I do on Fridays is I just go and uninstall all of them, and then I go back on Monday evening. So that's a way I unplug, all right? The other thing I think that helps if you are a perpetual social media user is to really think about what you've seen. Because some of it is really sensational, and it's painted in a way that looks very glorious and true. Like Jana, my sister called me and said, you see the couples are having problems. Nilikwambia marriage is a scam. And I didn't know the story. And so I was telling her, would it be that perhaps it's a marketing gimmick? Maybe they're trying to, push their whatever it is they're doing.
It's been tailored.
And then later in the day, she's like, guy, ulikuwa right na venye niko invested. So I think sometimes you want to, if you see something and it's so juicy, just pause a little and you want to reflect on the other angles, But highly recommend reading of books as much as you can. It gets you from a lot of trouble. More than what you get from books, it's what books bring out of you. It's what books bring out of you. You might never have a lifetime to live all these experiences. I mean, if you're lucky, you'll be here for 70 years, if you're very lucky. if you're very, very lucky. If you're very unlucky, even 42 can be a challenge. So what books have done for me especially is I've been with Rohitla at Tamadiba in the prison cells without ever having gone to Robben Island, right? I've marched down the streets of Washington DC with Martin Luther King Jr. It's Saretta King's story of marriage and the graces of marriage that I've learned without being married to her. It's reading about somebody who was, beaten in marriage for the longest time and decided to gather the strength and leave. So all these stories, for the ladies and even gents, I would recommend Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg, and if you're grieving the loss of somebody, she wrote an excellent book again, Option B. So I don't have to lose a wife to feel, kumbe mtu anasikiaga hivi. You could just read a book and see what Sheryl Sandberg went through. Her husband was having breakfast, woke up, went to the treadmill, fell and died. And now she had to go tell the kids that your father is dead. It's a true story, it happened to her. And the graces of it all, and how her friends change, and how some would avoid her because they don't know how to handle her. So that teaches you without you necessarily having to go through. Because in one lifetime, you can only go through so much. We'll never be presidents. All of us at least, some of us might be. But you can pick a book written by a president like Barack Obama, Audacity of Hope, and read it. And then you'll get the mind of a president. So it's not just enough to look at conscience. That's nice. So you can see conscience, jig a little to conscience, and then now hold a book and read. That's what I've learned. Look at different angles. You asked about doing a story as a community journalist and not coming off as though you've aped somebody. You want to have a different angle. It doesn't hurt to look, but not look with the intention of aping, but look like when I was joining radio, I was hosting this show, I needed to see what people in the business were doing. Not to lose my authenticity, but I looked far and wide. I looked at shows in Australia, looked at shows in London, looked at shows in South Africa, looked at the biggest names, because there's a reason they're big, right? And I was like, how do they intro? How do they outro? How do they ask questions? Right? Why is it they're big? And then I would read their bios. Why did they get on radio? What is it that grounds them? So I read all of that and then said, fine, how can I encompass all of these to my Ericness? Okay? So you want to have a different, if everybody is giving a story from a bird's eye view, why don't you look about it from beneath? Alright? So, or from the side, or from the corner. There are so many angles. Again, because of aping, again, because people lack authenticity, everybody is happy with a mic like this, which you hold and talk like that. But somebody else can think to have a, right? So I think it's just how you look at it. There is a way that not everybody will cover what you cover. Even if it's the same way. You would come here and talk about the same thing, but you would not talk about it like I did, and I would not talk about it like you would. Right? So you want to always live in your machismo, that you are enough to tell the story, even if it's been told 1,000 times. But the way you tell it is going to be very you. And that you is what matters. Does that make sense? Anybody else?
I have a question. You've been in the industry for the longest time. Yeah, the possible longest time that I could fathom. So I think you've seen how things go.
Yeah.
Can you honestly say that there's still this aspect of the real storytelling, the art of storytelling? Do people, the way you've said there was a lady who cloned stories, yeah? Okay, that's one way of telling stories too. So do you think if I decide I have listened to your story and then I go and quote it, I don't know how I should bring this, yeah? Do you think there's still that traditional way, the way people used to tell stories? They would personify the story, not to tell it in a direct report form. Do you think that aspect is still in our industry?
It should be, because look, but social media has changed a lot of things, but the more things change, the more they stay the same. So you want to be flexible enough to learn and to acquire new skills, but authentic enough to be centered in your youth. Okay? So I'll give you an example. Back in the years, there was really a bigness about personality, brand names. Like in the morning, I remember those years, maybe some of you were in nursery school, there was Nyambane and Caroline Motoko in the morning. Whoever had them in the morning, alright? And I used to wake up and listen to them, and Nyambane was like, "Habari yako, umeamka kutoka wapi?" And I'd listen from 5 in the morning, and then Carol would come with her suaveness and no nonsense personality, and that was good. And then in came the Maina Kagenis and Edward Kwaches and Jimmy Gathus and so on and so forth. Kaleche Mumos and Ses Mutungis and Mudhoni Buikas. You remember those names? So that was that era, the era of names and personalities. Now we're in a different era. We're in the era of content. Somebody would watch a random guy who is imitating rugby players with big behinds in the name of Crazy Kene and laugh in the office, than wait for somebody with a big name like Churchill. You know what I mean? So then the answer to your question would be, try much as you can to be centered in the you that you are, according to the dictates that are set out in journalism. Okay? Don't deviate. If you're authentic and professional, you will find your place in the world. You will find your place in the world. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he's fallen on hard times. And I was telling him, you are a brilliant graphic designer. Why is it you don't do graphic design? And without batting an eyelid, he told me, but graphic design is packed, man. Everyone is doing graphic. And I thought, what a stupid answer. You know, what are you waiting for graphic designers to die so you do it? Of course, there's so many people. There are millions of cameras. There are millions of mic makers. There are millions of water brands. So then what do you do? In Kenya, one of the challenges we have, I'll let you in on a secret. We lack credibility. It's as rare as, what is rare in East Africa? We are not credible. And it's so rife, so that if you took your blouse to a fundi and said, I have a wedding in 3 days, will you be able to make it in 3 days? Atasema, hii madam, fanya turn, ifanyie measurement turn. Hii hata 3 umeenda sana bwana. Hii leo ni lini? Wednesday. Thursday 4, kuja hapa itakuwa. Kesho 4, kuja. Then you go even at 10 p.m. on Wednesday or 10 a.m. on Wednesday. The same guy will tell you, haujui vile usi umetusumbua. Tumetafuta usi ya manjano. Na buttons, na material, na charan, kukosa hii oil ya. Now all of a sudden, there is no blouse. And he's giving you excuses. So you call a plumber, you say the same thing, my tap is leaking. Can you fix it? Hii ni rahisi. Una need pipe, utachukua gum, glue hapa, uchukue ile kitu ya black, unafunga both ends. Hii ni 10 minutes, lakini 1500 plus labor. So you take your M-Pesa, you send him money. That is Monday. Tuesday, Joakim, nakuja niko inda. Thursday, Joakim, hiki tutajaza nyumba ichafue carpet. Nakuja nimenunua hata hizi vitu bwana, nakuja. Saturday, Joakim, nini unanipigia kila saa nilisema nakuja bwana? Sunday next week. Sasa shiki simu. That is our biggest problem. It's our problem in the local place, in the global stage, in the nationals, everywhere. Kenyans are known to be so dodgy. Super dodgy. So I was telling my friend, if you can take up graphic design because you're gifted in it, make samples, go to 2 or 3 clients, even rebrand their image, go and take to them, say, I thought about your project, that view plaza doesn't look good. I thought to make it better. Would you like this for your, of course you get a watermark. Would you like this for your new logo? Yeah, that looks amazing. All right. Do you have a budget for it? I'll charge 10,000, 15,000 for it. And then give it to them. Then I told him the second thing you should do When you promise Monday, deliver it on Sunday. The latest Monday when they're opening the office. You'll beat everybody else. So we lack credibility. We are not credible people. We are not honest people. We like to lie that we are. We say we are 80% Christians, but we are not. If you call someone for this meeting and you told them at 10, I guarantee you, any 10 people, only one might show up at 10:15. Am I lying? I'm not lying to you. Only one will show up at 10:15. Yet the best acceptable time for a 10 o'clock appointment is 9:45. But how many people will come at 9:45? So then I was telling my friend, you have to package it and deliver on time. I used to see it in my entire work in the media. Every day, I would see laziness every day without maligning anybody. But they would not research. People would come and warm the seat for a whole 3-hour show. And be like, yeah, I want to agree with what Erica said. I totally agree with what Erica said. In fact, what Erica said about that thing he has said, which he said. And you're drawing a salary. Alright? So I think it's very important, and the challenge was, maybe it's not part of the program, but just try much as you can to be honest. There's a reggae song I like. Be honest to yourself. Be honest to yourself. Watch another, the next person. You. How did I do today? I was told to do A, B, and C. How much of that have I done well? You know, how much of that have I done? Not just do it. You know, there's just doing it. You know, I can come here and say, oh, nitaongea tu vitu mbili. Hakuna mambo ya passion na watu wanawastiki watu wa time. Mbona juju tu niende. But really, is that what you want? In a very competent world where people are exerting themselves. Also, you want to think global. What is your age mate doing in Chicago? Because the world has become so small now. Eh? You can't just resign to what your neighbor is doing in Umo or Kile. What is the person doing in Brisbane and Melbourne? Your age, in your field. What are journalists doing? You know, I look at a lot of our journalists and I wonder, do they know about Christiana Nampo? Does she inspire them? Like when you're walking like this on the news. Then you walk like that with your skirt. Then you walk and pause. How much of that is important in the quest of where you're going? I mean, you look at Christiana Mpo, she has the world in her fingertips. She'll talk about Bosnia, the Great Berlin Wall. She's interviewed presidents. Isn't that inspirational if you're a journalist? Isn't that better than twerking? Twerking is nice. Don't get me wrong. Twerking is beautiful and it has its place. But when you've been given an opportunity, there's a scripture I like, it says, do you know a man's skilled at his craft? It pauses. He will work for kings and queens and not ordinary men. Do you know a man skilled at his craft? He will work for kings and queens and not ordinary men. Kings and queens don't like ordinary people. Kings and queens don't want to work with their plumbing. They don't. They don't. Do you think Uhuru has time for someone who will say, Niko Inda, Nakam? Nobody. Nobody has time for that. Alright? And so if you're going to be the best of the best of the best, the world does not have places for that. So before the glory has to come the story. So I would say that very strongly. Maybe a point of introspection. Just think to do, when you're given an opportunity, and opportunities you will find, just do it well. Don't be lazy. Don't leave your handbag and run and hide and say, wameona handbag yangu, unajua iko empty. Niliacha tu hapo ndio. Wajue niko kwa ofisi. Na niko hapa tao nimemeet Jemo. You know? You know? Yeah, so I think that's very, very important, you know? So, did that answer you?
Yes.
Just a quick question. I want you to intrigue us. Tell us about just a summary of Eric's story.
Eric's stories. Oh, well, Eric's stories is about two people, I like to call it. Me and the person watching it. And we talk about issues of adult life. We talk about sex, money, and relationships. But from a very authentic standpoint. We don't speak at each other. I don't come there to teach, I share. Very vulnerably about those issues. And the goal simply is to get to become better, really. You just get to become better, behave better, date wiser. Don't just resign to, he's tall, that's not enough. That's not enough, and that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm on Instagram and Twitter and YouTube. It's at ERIQ_stories. So you can go check it out.
Is it different from adults in the room?
I used to come up with all the adults in the room content, so it's very similar. Yeah, very similar. That's my brainchild. Even the name I came up with. All right. Fight with my former employer. Before I signed the contract, I said I don't want to trend. I don't want a stupid, forgive my French, hashtag. I don't want foolishness. I don't want to dance. I will not get on top of a table and twerk. I don't want, they call it shock joke. You know those things you say, crazy things, so that people watch. So I said I'm not gonna do that. And if you would want me to do that, tell me now so that we stop here. And said, oh, no. I understand you don't want to be flippant. No, that's good. I'm looking for authenticity. That's what he said. And then so 3 months in, he started. He'd send an article and say, why don't you guys discuss this? So the article would be something so crazy like, oh, the longest, let's say, woman's organ in Nigeria has done I don't know what. So I text back and say, first of all, this is a shock joke story. Second of all, it doesn't serve any purpose. I don't see the purpose this will serve. It doesn't entertain. If anything, it's repelling, you know. And so I started to get into a lot of loggerheads with, again, that particular person. So I said, I am happy to inform, to educate, and to entertain. All right? And I'm capable of doing that. I don't want eyeballs for eyeballs' sake, because a lot of media does that now. You've seen, like shocking things. Say his example, Raila said to a secret meeting between, like something. Then you read the entire thing and there's nothing, you know. Or they say, you wouldn't believe what Huda did to Larimado. The 11th thing will shock you. So you're there. You know, and I think it's just conmanship, really.
Yeah.
You know. So I in all the meetings I would say I don't want to do that. I don't care that we trend. If I speak to just one person and I make an impression upon that person, he is going to be enamored enough to tell the next person, and it's going to spread. All right. Plus, we have social media. We can share snippets of our show. We don't need to do anything dodgy. And I think he mentioned adults in the room. To be honest, without blowing my trumpet, he did exceptionally well until I left. And I'm not blowing my trumpet again, because I hear people to date sending me emails and say, please come back. This is crazy. These guys are boring. These guys are this. You know? And it's because I thought to put it high up here in terms of credibility and authenticity, and not just be like everybody else, because it's so easy to follow the masses, you know. So how I did that, I would say through faith. You know, and also I'm a very centered person who values and holds very dear my values. I keep saying that if you don't have values, you will not have value. You know, if you don't have values, you're not going to have value. So the moment you divorce yourself from values, you become valueless. Sa unaendeshwa, you know. So that's why I was saying it's important to get to a place where you put your foot down and say, as for me and myself, I cannot do that. So you either find somebody else to do it, or the day you want it done, you can permit me to leave. And it requires that you are ballsy, because if you're not, they are going to right you wrong. But you see, the evidence is there clearly for everybody to see that that norm of being propagated is not working. It's not working. You can almost handpick the people who are doing the excellent work. And it's very lonely to stand boldly, because you can even get fired, But you have to choose if you're going to keep warm with the salary or to stay bold. But the good news is that you won't die. No, it does influence how reporting is done, and it does influence and affect impartiality. I mean, just before we started, Zara was telling me how Citizen has now become a MOJO TV, right? And the dangers are cataclysmic, because people don't trust you. You see, if you're telling a story and you're telling the story from a very subjective standpoint, you lose credibility. When people start saying, huyu ni Erika anaongea, Erika anakuwa mtu wa Raila. Anyway, tulikuwa tunaendaje? That's exactly what happens. And then the other danger is what happens after the elections. What happens after your person who you're pushing loses? Alright? And yes, it's true that a lot of politicians get a lot of money from government, and they set up media stations, again, to propagate their narrative. Okay? Because if you are on a media house, you can control the masses, really. Because for some interesting reason, Kenyans are such high consumerists to political shenanigans. They don't consume agriculture like that. Like, you don't see Kenyans sitting and watching how to grow maize successfully. But they know everything Raila said yesterday before he went to bed. Cheki, unajua juzi Raila alikuwa anasema. Na ni mambo ya ajabu sana. Alisema. You know? So then it's sad. But again, back to what we were saying earlier, there are so many, while there's a lot of stories of despair, there's also tons of stories of hope. I like to draw a lot of inspirations from people like Larry Madowo, who tried with the little he had to become very, very impartial. I don't think Larry ever sat down and, you would not say Larry ni mtu wa nani. Maybe he would, but I remember one time he was interviewing Miguna and he shut him up and asked him to leave the show. So that was very, very rare. You don't see a lot of that, which just lends credence to my point that if you're grounded and you're a person of value, you might not find value in your locality, in your community, or even in your country, but value can find you from the US.